Welcome back to continuing chapter 10 today. We didn't get very far last time. I kept talking more and more about the map, and I'm going to keep it behind me so I can point to the places that the different battles and things are occurring, because there's so much happening in this particular part of the war, and it's not just in one location. So if we remember, I didn't even reference last time that in Illinois, in southern Illinois, is where Jethro is. And they are considered to be a northern state, although I have it outlined in black to have it kind of stand out for us. And then we have this kind of line here of the blue, that these are all of our northern states. We have the line of the red, that these are our southern states. And then in the green, these were our border states that had to eventually make a decision. And some of these states up here had started out in green and then sided with the North, whereas Kentucky started out in green and then sided with the South. So we have all of this tension, and then lots of states below. And then the top half of this map is missing, although we get into the Finger Lakes up here, and then New York is above Pennsylvania, and then we have our other states up above there. Most of our other states that are on the west of the states that are listed here were not states at the time. Those are territories, but there were battles occurring there as well that aren't mentioned as much in our book. Once again, I'm on a tangent talking about all sorts of things, but hopefully it's helping you understand a little bit more about what was happening. So we do have 3 questions left to answer in chapter 10. I hope we get through them in this lesson, but if I talk too much, it might be one more lesson, so we'll see. Let's take a look at those 3 questions. They are, question 4, what were people's feelings about the Battle of Gettysburg? We were just getting into the information about the Battle of Gettysburg. Question 5, why did Jenny go to Washington? Ooh, that sounds exciting. What would she be doing in Washington? That's a long way to travel back in the Civil War when she's traveling by horse and carriage, possibly. And then question 6, was Jenny's trip to Washington worthwhile? So I will stop the share, and then we are going to take a look at our books. Please get your book out. We are at the top of page 152. And we had just had the introduction, early July of Gettysburg, a spot of ground in Pennsylvania that Jethro had never heard of before. Gettysburg is right here in Pennsylvania. So it is in the southern part of Pennsylvania, kind of in the middle, but more towards the east. The news of the battle was confused at first, incoherent, sometimes contradictory, meaning that they're not in agreement on what they're saying. But one thing was certain. Here was a clash that roared with a violence and terror such as the country had never known before. It was a battle of unbelievable bravery and unbelievable ruthlessness. It was a clash of agonizing errors, checkered with moves of brilliant strategy that lasted through 3 hot July days. After which the news of victory came, a Union victory, and a great one, but still not a complete one. With broken young bodies piled high at Gettysburg and thousands of homes rocked in agony over their loss. The beaten army was allowed to withdraw and prepare for still more bloodshed. So they allowed the Confederates to retreat and to go away and prepare for the next battle instead of wiping them out again. While the victorious army licked its wounds and made no effort to pursue its opportunities. So they basically are just taking care of the wounded, trying to recover themselves rather than continuing to go fight. All over the North, people were beginning to say, what is it? What does it mean? Is there bad blood somewhere? Is there a conspiracy among Northern generals that prevents their following up an opportunity for crushing Lee's army? Then, in the midst of the pandemonium over Gettysburg, another Union victory was announced. Vicksburg had fallen. So remember, this is close to where Ebb was. So now we're not up here anymore. Now we're down in the south. And Vicksburg is right down here along the Mississippi. General Pemberton, completely surrounded by Grant's army, had been cut off from all supplies and had been starved into surrender. Grant was a hero once again in the papers that had printed no good word of him in months. Ulysses S. Grant was the man of the hour, and some people with short memories said, "I told you so." Old unconditional surrender Grant is the man who will win this war. Abe Lincoln was right. They'd better send a barrel of liquor to Grant, a barrel of the liquor Grant drinks to some of his other generals. God bless old U.S. Grant. So a couple days ago, they're condemning him for being a drinker, and then all of a sudden, that must be what's helping him win. Let's send it to everybody. They're just pleased. 2 wins. Good win up in the north. However, it doesn't feel complete because instead of following them out and continuing to crush them and maybe start to take over Virginia, they let them leave and they lick their own wounds. But then, yay, we have another battle and a win down here in the south for the north. At the bottom of 152. Of the fall of Vicksburg, the president said, the father of waters again goes unvexed to the sea. Jethro smiled as he read that. What he would give to talk to Shad about those words of Mr. Lincoln's, to remember with him that night when they had looked at the long wavy line on a roughly drawn map and had wondered how long the fighting would go on. Shadrach, however, was very far away and was a part of the price which the Battle of Gettysburg had cost. A letter came addressed to Matt from a spinster aunt of Shadrach's who lived in Washington, a woman of whom Shad had often spoken. The letter ran in part. So I'm not sure if you caught that, but Shadrach was part of the Battle of Gettysburg. There were many, many injuries and fatalities in that particular battle, even though we won. A letter comes from the aunt. She says, "He was brought here from Gettysburg with serious wounds, which became gangrenous." So remember, that was a vocab word. They're like infected and green and before his arrival. "I was fortunate in finding him, since I am a volunteer nurse at the hospital where he lies. He has had short periods of consciousness, during which time he has begged me to write to Jenny Crichton. He calls for her constantly in his delirium. I wish to tell you, sir, that I will gladly pay the girl's expenses to Washington and give her shelter in my home if you will allow her to make the trip. I must tell you that my nephew's condition is very critical." So, what is happening here? Shadrach is very wounded, almost to the point that he's not always conscious, not always alert of what he's saying, delirious. When he is awake, he's asking to write to Jenny. When he's not awake and delirious, he's talking about her. So she's saying she's not sure he's going to make it, but it would do him so much good if Jenny could come see him, possibly before he dies. "I'll pay for her to come. She can stay in my home. Please send Jenny to Washington." Ross Milton had driven up to the farm the day the letter came. The editor was often a visitor, spending hours talking to Matt, staying overnight now and then and testing Jethro's progress in the book on English usage. Sometimes Jenny would join in taking the tests, and Ross Milton would tease her a little. "The wife of a schoolmaster must learn to speak correctly, mustn't she, Jenny?" The family was always glad to see him. He enlivened for a short time the passing of one monotonous day after another. Later on the day the news came from Shadrach's aunt, Jethro sat with his father and the editor in the yard just outside the cabin door. The hot summer night was velvet black across the fields and in the dooryard too, except for a ray of lamplight that came from the room where Ellen and Nancy sat beside Jenny and tried to comfort her. The 3 who sat in the dooryard did not speak. There was no sound in the night except for the deep, tired sobs within the cabin. Finally, Ross Milton leaned forward in his chair. "Matt," he said in a low voice, If you will let her go to him, I'll take her to Washington and see that she is safe. For a while, Jethro thought that his father was never going to reply. The old man sat turning his cane between his hands and staring down in the darkness at his feet. Finally, he said, "Ain't it 10 to 1 that it's too late?" "As I see it, you'd better gamble, Matt. It will be better for the girl to have tried to get to him, even if it is too late. And if it's not too late, I'm a hard-bitten bachelor, Matt, but I don't underestimate the possibilities of young love in a situation like this. I can pay my own girl's expense. I'll not have her beholden to a stranger. But what about you, Milton? You ain't in health for the likes of that journey, are you?" "I can clench my teeth against pain in a railway car as well as at home. I'll go with her if you say the word." "I wouldn't let them marry," Matt said slowly. "I thought she was too young, and so she is. Still, a man don't always know what's best. I only know I can't stand to see her suffer this way if there be one chance for her to see him alive." He reached out to Jethro then for aid in helping him to rise. "I'll have to talk to Ellen," he said. "Let's go inside." It was all arranged that night, and the next morning when Jethro awoke and went downstairs at dawn, he found Jenny already dressed in her best clothes, her face wan and pale, but her weeping stopped by excitement and a thin hope. She put her arms around her brother, and Jethro returned her embrace. They didn't say anything. There was too much danger of a breakdown if they talked. An hour later, Jenny and Ross Milton were gone in the buggy. He had driven up from Newton. They would go to Olney, take the train to St. Louis, and from there go on to Washington. Jethro did not go to the fields that day. Instead, he roamed about and finally, as if drawn to it, went up to the room adjoining the schoolhouse. The room Matt Crichton had allowed to be built because a man has the right to his own fireside after a hard day's work. The room had been used the winter before by a teacher who had been hired for the 3 winter months, a term during which Jethro had gone to school for only a few days. The elderly teacher was a man without learning, without the wisdom that some unlearned men acquire with their years, without even the saving grace of kindness. Remembering the wonder and pleasure of learning when Shadrach taught, Jethro walked away from the classroom with fierce resentment. I'm going to pause for just a second. I'm not sure if you can hear all that banging happening outside my door, but I'm going to go see what's happening, and I'll be back with you in a second. Well, we may just have to deal with it. They're just playing. Hopefully that noise won't continue. So that last paragraph that I just read on page 155 was talking about the teacher that had been there before Shadrach. And then we're on the second full paragraph. "I get more out of staying home and reading the newspapers the way Shad told me to do." Oh, I'm sorry, not the one that was hired while Shad was gone. "And working out the exercises in Mr. Milton's book," he told his father. There had been a time when Matt Crichton brooked no criticism of a teacher from his children. They went to school when it was in session. The teacher's word was law, and their father wanted to hear no complaints concerning either discipline or the quality of instruction. But Matt had changed in his later years. He talked to the teacher for a while one afternoon. That night, he gave Jethro permission to remain at home. "The man is not only without book learning, as I am, but he has a mean and pinched-in mind," Matt told Ellen. "The boy is right. He'll learn more by tenfold on his own." As Jethro looked about the room that morning of Jenny's departure, he felt a dull anger at sight of the cluttered filth the old teacher had left. The room had once been a place of beauty for Jethro, a room of color and firelight, of books and singing, and a sense of deep friendship, which he was sure he would never have again if Shadrach died in the Washington hospital. He touched the rough-hewn bookshelves, the mantel above the fireplace, the wall where the guitar had hung. "Maybe I'll ask Nancy for soap and water. Maybe she'll help me clean the place," he whispered to himself. "If Shad ever comes back, I'd like for this room to be clean and nice for him." Then he shook his head at his own dreaming. He had heard Ross Milton warning Jenny the night before. We must remember, girl, that there's only one chance in 100 that this trip will have a happy ending. But we're going to concentrate on that one chance. Jethro sat down on a bench in the hot, dusty room. There was no comfort in being there, but he could think of no other place where he wished to be. They lived through many dreary days of waiting. Every day, someone, Nancy and Jethro, Ed Turner, even Matt, when the others were too busy, would drive into town to see if there was a letter. For many days, there wasn't. And the only slim comfort they could find was to remember that there was one chance, one in maybe 100. Then finally, there came a letter from Ross Milton. The boy is still desperately ill, but he will live. I am convinced of that, in spite of all my fears, for if ever a lad seized life and held on to it with both hands, it was young Yale who did so when he opened his eyes and saw that little girl you had sent to him. There were many letters from both Jenny and Ross Milton that summer, letters that brought hope and comfort to the family at home. The long ride on the trains was like a bad dream to me, the first letter from Jenny ran. But Mr. Milton talked to me with the greatest kindness, and he kept my spirits up. When finally we got here, I was so tired and my dress was wrinkled and full of dust. But the minute I saw Shad, it was like heaven for both of us. I thank you, Pa and Ma, and I will thank you all the days of my life that you let me come to him. I feel sure that you have saved his life and my happiness. I'm sorry, I always get choked up. Later, there came a request from the young couple, a request written and subscribed to by a hard-bitten bachelor, Ross Milton. Matt dictated his answer to Jethro and then signed his own trembling signature. My wife and I give consent that our daughter Jenny Elizabeth Crichton, age 16, may marry Shadrach Yale, Union soldier, under the witness of a trusted friend, Editor Ross Milton. Signed, Matthew Benjamin Crichton. The envelope carrying Jenny's next letter bore a self-conscious return address in the upper left-hand corner, a return to Mrs. Shadrach Yale of Washington, D.C. The first paragraph of the letter within that envelope was addressed to Jethro. And please take down the Bible, Jeth, and in your best hand write this beside my name, married to Shadrach Yale, August 14th, 1863. Then she went on to describe her wedding day. I wore the white dress you give me in the kindness of your heart, Nancy, and it was washed and ironed fresh and pretty. Mr. Milton went out and bought the ring for Shad. It is solid gold, and it has little lines in it that make it look like gold lace. I think I will never take it off. I stood by Shad's bed, and there were sick boys all around, but they all smiled at me. So did Aunt Victoria, who doesn't smile very often, poor woman, because she works so hard and sees so much of suffering. Mr. Milton had to leave right away to take the train back home, but he kissed my hand before he left and called me Mrs. Yale, and that sounded so nice to me. The only thing that could have been better was if all of you that I love so much had been here. She told of her life as a young bride in Washington in another letter. I go to the hospital every day and do all I can to ease the pain that is all around me. At first, Aunt Victoria said it wasn't right for a young girl to be here, but I made her see that I couldn't sit at home when others was needing so much help so much. I do what the nurses tell me, and they say I mind and don't make trouble like some ladies do. Some of the things I see would have made me faint a year ago, but now I face them the way the nurses and doctors do. I do all I can because I thank God so much that Chad is going to get well. And I have hit the minute mark, I think, except that I did pause it. So there's not even 2 full pages left. We're going to wrap this up and then be done for today. So still in Jenny's letter. Aunt Victoria has a nice big house with a real stove in the kitchen. She lets me make big kettles of soup there, and a man she knows comes and takes it to the hospital in a little wagon. I feed as many boys as I can from it because they sometimes have to eat stuff that we would throw away at home. Sometimes I bake fresh bread and spread it with butter, And Shad and them that is laying near him clap their hands when they see me begin to hand it out. It is hot in the city, and sometimes at night when I come back to Aunt Victoria's house, I am tired and wishful for the silver poplars to set under. I see all your faces in my mind, and I wonder how is Jeff getting along in the fields by himself. And I think how good it is that Nancy and little boys are there to give you comfort. There's so much pain and sorrow here, and the city is bad too. There is filth in the streets and flies swarming and even rats running, sometimes right in front of me when I walk home. But this is where my husband is, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere in this world except close by his side. But sometimes I wonder if we are the only two happy people in this town. Jethro took the letters after the others had finished reading them and kept them in his room, where he could read and reread them to himself. He felt a great sense of peace within him as he read. Shad was going to live. Over and over he repeated those words, and in the morning when he woke with a feeling of happiness and wondered at the cause of it, he would remember. Shad was going to live. He felt as if somehow he had been granted a gift in escaping a sorrow that would have scarred his life. The letter he finally wrote to Jenny with Ross Milton's book close at hand as an aid to spelling was a simple one. He had no fine phrases to help him convey his feelings, but Jenny found it a good letter, and she kept it all the years of her life. Dear Jenny, we are all feeling much pleasure here to know that Shad is better and is going to get well. We are glad that you and Shad are married. It is hard to get used to thinking that you are Mrs. Yale and not just Jenny. If only the war would soon be over and you and Shad could come back here, it would be a wonderful, happy thing for all of us. The crops are good, but we could use some rain. Your pa and ma are as well as usual, and your sister Nancy is too. The little boys are in good health, except that Johnny run a nail in his foot last week, but he is all right now. It is lonesome to work in the fields without you to talk to and to make me laugh sometimes, but it is better for you to be with Shad. I wrote what you told me to in the Bible, and it looks fine. Do you ever see Mr. Lincoln? I would like to see him very much and thank him for the letter he wrote to me. What does Shad think about that General Grant? Think about it that General Grant is the top man in the army now. You ask him for me. Yours very truly, your brother, Jethro H. Crichton. And there is the end of chapter 10. So obviously, was that trip to Washington, D.C. a success? I would hope you would think so. The Gettysburg answer was right on that first page when I was talking about the different things with Grant. What did people think about Gettysburg? And remember me talking about the difference between pushing on to get rid of the army or allowing them to retreat and heal. So make sure that, once again, your answers to these questions start with a capital letter, end with a period, and should be more than one sentence. They must include text details, and please explain them as much as you can. Restate, answer, cite, explain. All right, have a great day, and I will see your answers soon. Bye.